Think about the last time you sat down to watch a new television show.
Or, even just clicked on a video online.
Yeah, exactly. Think about your physical posture in those first few seconds.
I mean, your thumb is probably hovering right over the skip button.
Right. You're just ready to swipe away. We've basically internalized this almost biological expectation.
That if the creator doesn't grab us by the throat within, the first 5 seconds.
We are out.
Yeah, completely out.
If there isn't a massive explosion or some shocking betrayal or just a dizzying mystery introduced immediately, we move on.
We're constantly demanding this relentless, intravenous drip of adrenaline.
Just to justify giving our attention to something.
Right, because the media landscape is fundamentally engineered in laboratories to spike that adrenaline.
It really is.
Attention spans aren't treated as a capacity for contemplation anymore. They're treated as a highly volatile commodity.
In a totally cutthroat marketplace.
Exactly. The prevailing logic across almost all contemporary storytelling is that your only viable survival strategy is to be the loudest.
The loudest, the fastest, and definitely the most visually shocking.
Yeah, we are basically functioning in a state of perpetual narrative hyperventilation.
And honestly, it is exhausting.
So exhausting.
Which is why today, for you listening to this deep dive, we are actively pulling the emergency brake.
We really are. We're exploring a piece of source material that analyzes the story, operating in direct, unapologetic defiance of every single modern storytelling rule we just mentioned.
We are looking at a really comprehensive thematic breakdown of a novel called Theo of Golden by Allen Levi.
And it's fascinating because our sources on this book don't mention cliffhangers.
No, not at all. They don't highlight any high-stakes political intrigue or, world-ending catastrophes.
They lay out the architecture of a completely unassuming, quiet story about a small town.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because it is a profound departure from that hyperventilation we were talking about.
What stands out immediately in the critical breakdown of Levi's work is this massive emphasis on emotional impact.
But achieved through stillness, right?
Exactly. The analysis we're working from argues that this book refuses to demand your attention through cheap neurological tricks.
It doesn't scream at you.
No, it earns your investment entirely through a deliberate storytelling style that is deeply, almost uncomfortably grounded in everyday human reality.
And that is the core mission for us today. We need to unpack how a quiet book about a small town might actually be exactly what you need.
A story that our sources literally describe as possessing no urgency.
Right. How can that be the absolute best shortcut to gaining the perspective you need in your life right now?
It's a great question.
I'll admit, when I first read the framing in the notes describing the book as a quiet conversation on a long afternoon, I felt a wave of skepticism.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, in a culture that values the hustle, a slow conversation feels almost irresponsible.
It feels like you're wasting time.
Yeah. How does a story with zero rush paradoxically hold a reader so deeply that they just refuse to put it down?
Well, that skepticism is a natural byproduct of how we've been conditioned.
We've been trained to view a lack of speed as a lack of substance.
Exactly. But what the source material does right out of the gate is recalibrate that expectation.
It really does.
The notes themselves operate as an exercise in pacing. By warning the prospective reader, and us as the analysts, that this is not a high-speed thriller, it forces an adjustment of your internal rhythm.
You cannot engage with this text using the same mental apparatus you use to scroll through a social media feed.
No, it requires a completely different cognitive posture.
Think about it like this. If the vast majority of our media diet right now is the equivalent of a double shot of espresso.
Right, designed to jolt your central nervous system.
Spike your heart rate, get you buzzing so you can frantically move on to whatever is next.
Then Theo of Golden is framed as a slow, steeped tea.
Yes, if you rush the brewing process of a good tea, you don't get a faster beverage.
You just get a cup of hot, tasteless water.
Exactly. The complexity of the flavor profile only releases if you give it the time it demands.
You have to literally let it sit alone in the dark for a few minutes.
The mechanics of that analogy map perfectly onto the psychological experience of reading Levi's novel.
They really do. The first major theme identified in our source material is this concept of pacing as a deliberate antidote to the modern world.
The text is explicit.
Oh.
Theo of Golden is not engineered to be rushed.
The analysis stresses that you do not skim this narrative.
You do not read it with the sole objective of moving it from the currently reading pile to the finished pile.
And I know so many people do that.
I mean, I feel personally attacked by that.
Right.
The compulsion to finish things has completely hijacked the way we consume art.
We track our pages on apps.
We stare at the percentage bar at the bottom of our e-readers, constantly calculating how many minutes are left in the chapter.
It turns the act of reading into an administrative task.
We just want the data point of having consumed it.
But the breakdown of Levi's work suggests that if you treat this book as a task to be completed, you will entirely miss the point.
It is meant to be experienced.
It establishes a tone that is rooted in being present.
And presence is fundamentally incompatible with urgency.
What's fascinating here is the distinction the source text makes. It points out that while there is absolutely no urgency in Levi's writing, there is intention in every word.
Intention over urgency.
Right. To understand why that matters, we have to look at the psychology behind what we usually call a page-turner.
When we think of a gripping book, we are usually thinking of urgent writing.
And urgent writing relies on cultivating a state of mild anxiety in the reader.
The author intentionally creates an information deficit.
Like a literal or metaphorical ticking clock.
A locked door, a missing person.
Your brain experiences that deficit as tension, and you physically read faster to relieve that tension by acquiring the missing information.
So you are skimming the paragraphs just to get to the dialogue tag to find out who survived the explosion. The actual words on the page become an obstacle standing between you and the dopamine hit of the plot resolution.
But exactly the opposite dynamic is at play in Theo of Golden.
Intentional writing, as the source defines it here, strips away the ticking clock.
By removing the anxiety about the future, the author forces your cognitive apparatus to deal with the present moment.
The engagement is no longer about relieving tension.
It's about deep immersion in the current environment.
The text argues that this deliberate slowing down is the actual source of the book's power.
It challenges the prevailing notion of what makes a story captivating.
It asks whether a narrative can hold you firmly in place rather than violently dragging you forward.
Yeah.
I hear the theory there, but let me push back on this a bit.
Sure, go ahead.
Because in practice, if there is no urgency, no shocking twists, no mystery to solve, I struggle to see how an author actually maintains the hook.
It's a fair point.
We are incredibly conditioned animals. If I sit down after a brutal 10-hour workday, my brain wants that dopamine hit of a mystery or a thriller to escape reality.
You want to be distracted.
Yeah. If a book is just, quiet, isn't there a massive risk that a modern reader just puts it down on the nightstand, goes to sleep, and genuinely forgets to ever pick it back up?
Where is the gravitational pull?
Exactly. Where is the pull?
It is a valid concern, and the source material actually anticipates it.
Okay.
It acknowledges that this approach runs completely counter to modern narrative conditioning. But the pull doesn't come from adrenaline.
It comes from authenticity.
Yes. When a story provides a profound, unwavering sense of grounding, it bypasses the desire for cheap thrills.
It taps into a much deeper human psychological need.
The desire for resonance and understanding.
The text explicitly points out that the engagement stems from the sheer reality of the narrative.
If an author can construct a character or a scenario that makes you, the reader, feel deeply seen.
If they can articulate a nuanced human truth that you have felt but never really had the words for,
you'll return to that book.
Not because you are frantic to know what happens next,
but because you are craving that feeling of connection.
It reminds me of the difference between going to a massive, chaotic amusement park versus going to the home of a friend you've known for 20 years.
Oh, that's a brilliant way to look at it.
The amusement park relies entirely on adrenaline. The flashing lights, the manufactured drops, the really loud noises.
It's thrilling, sure.
But it's fundamentally exhausting.
Yeah.
And the second you leave the park, the feeling evaporates.
It's totally gone.
You don't go to your friend's living room for a roller coaster.
No, you go there to sit on a worn-out couch.
Maybe not even talking the whole time.
Yeah.
Just to feel a sense of stable grounding.
The lack of frantic action isn't boring. It's the entire point.
The durability of that experience is what the source material is highlighting here.
An adrenaline rush from a plot twist is totally ephemeral.
Once you know the twist, the book loses its primary utility.
But a profound sense of grounding, an emotional truth that settles into your subconscious.
That has staying power.
The source notes that this story quietly earns your attention rather than demanding it.
Which is why it stays with you long after the final page.
It doesn't fade the moment the plot resolves, because the plot was never the primary vehicle for value.
And if the plot isn't the vehicle, then the entire weight of the reader's engagement rests squarely on the shoulders of the characters.
It has to.
You can't have a quiet, character-driven story without someone incredibly compelling at the center of it.
Which transitions us to the anchor of this whole experience.
The protagonist, Theo.
And from what the sources say, he is a massive departure from what we expect a main character to be.
Theo is structurally fascinating.
According to the conventions of modern fiction, especially Western fiction, he is a total anomaly.
The source material paints a very specific picture of who he is and who he deliberately is not.
He resides in the town of Golden. He is unassuming.
He is exceptionally quiet.
He possesses no celebrity, no grand ambition.
And he does not fit the mold of a traditional active hero.
The notes literally describe him as someone who is just there.
If I walked into a publisher's office today and pitched a main character whose defining trait is that he doesn't really do anything and is just kind of existing in a town,
you would be laughed out of the room.
Absolutely laughed out of the room. We are obsessed with the hero's journey.
We demand protagonists who seize their destiny,
Who disrupt the status quo and impose their sheer will upon the universe.
But the source insists that Theo's tendency to step back from the spotlight is precisely what makes the narrative function.
He is defined by how he understands the world, not by how he acts upon it.
The demand for an actor protagonist is so deeply ingrained in us.
We evaluate characters based on their agency.
Right. A character must face an obstacle, make a decisive choice, and drive the plot forward through their actions.
In literary theory, calling a protagonist passive is almost always a severe critique.
It implies a character who is merely a victim of circumstance, floating along while the plot happens to them.
However, the source material clarifies that Theo represents a highly elevated, intentional form of passivity.
His stillness is not born of weakness or indecision. It is an active, deliberate posture.
He listens. He meticulously observes.
He generates space for the people around him.
In a cultural moment overflowing with noise and the relentless assertion of ego, the text argues that representing pure attention and presence in fiction is radically scarce.
Theo isn't exerting his will on the town of Golden.
He is exerting his attention on it.
That completely flips the script.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If he is exerting attention rather than action, then he isn't actually the subject of the portrait.
Theo isn't the painting at all.
He's the frame holding it. Or, better yet, thinking about how the notes describe his function, he is the magnifying glass.
Oh, I like that.
He's the glass that lets us see the hidden details of the people in Golden who would otherwise go completely unnoticed.
The source explicitly states this. Theo isn't just a character. He's a lens.
The mechanical metaphor of a lens perfectly articulates the author's narrative strategy.
A lens, by its very physical nature, does not generate its own light.
Its sole function is to gather existing light and focus it to reveal clarity.
Through the lens of Theo, the reader gains access to the lives of the town's ordinary inhabitants.
The text emphasizes that these secondary characters possess extraordinary hidden layers.
Unspoken secrets, profound regrets, and quiet capacities for kindness.
If Theo were a traditional, loud, action-driven hero, his narrative shadow would be far too immense.
The reader wouldn't be able to perceive the nuances in the secondary characters because the narrative spotlight would constantly be blinding us with Theo's own heroics.
It's the difference between shining a massive Hollywood spotlight on a stage versus using that microscope slide.
The spotlight demands you look at the star.
And everything else falls into absolute darkness.
Theo just holds the environment still so you can appreciate the complexity of the ecosystem.
The text drives this home. The book is truly about everyone around him, not just him.
This structural choice forces us to confront how we assign value to human beings,
both in the stories we consume and in our daily reality.
Societally, we heavily overvalue the doers.
The disruptors, the loud innovator.
People constantly asserting their presence.
The source text suggests a counter-narrative here.
There is immense, often overlooked value in individuals whose primary contribution to their community is comprehension.
Constructing a character who is defined primarily by how he understands others proposes a paradigm shift.
It suggests that deep empathy, active observation, and the simple act of bearing witness to another person's life
are acts of profound narrative and moral weight.
It really makes you evaluate the people in your own life.
It does. We all have someone who functions as a lens, even if we've never used that word for them.
They aren't the ones holding court at a dinner party.
They rarely talk about their own accomplishments.
But when you sit down next to them, the way they listen makes you feel like you are the only human being on the planet.
They absorb your reality without trying to overwrite it with their own.
And you walk away from a 10-minute conversation with them feeling untangled.
You feel understood.
Theo seems to be the literary embodiment of that specific, rare type of person.
And by placing a character with those specific traits at the absolute center of the novel, Levi requires the reader to adopt a similar psychological posture.
To engage meaningfully with Theo, the reader must mirror his patience.
You have to decelerate and observe the town of Golden through his unhurried perspective.
If you attempt to rush a magnifying glass across a complex specimen, you simply end up with a blurry, nauseating image.
You must hold it steady to see the cellular structure.
The very design of the narrative demands deep presence from the audience.
But if the protagonist is a lens rather than a plot engine, the author faces a massive structural problem.
Huge problem.
You cannot build a traditional three-act thriller around a guy who just watches people.
No, the actual architecture of the novel has to fundamentally change to support that kind of character.
Which moves us from the who of the story to the how.
The source material uses a very specific image to describe the storytelling style here.
It claims that reading this book feels like sitting on a quiet front porch while someone tells small-town stories.
The deployment of the front porch metaphor in the source material is doing a tremendous amount of analytical work.
Consider the sociological function of a front porch in American architectural history.
A porch is a liminal space.
It exists in the boundary layer between the deeply private sanctuary of the home and the fully public exposure of the street.
It represents a zone of safety, devoid of immediate pressure.
When you occupy a front porch, you have implicitly stepped out of the flow of commerce and labor.
You are not rushing toward a destination.
You are engaging in a state of relaxed, open-ended observation.
You are watching the ecosystem of the neighborhood.
You acknowledge the postal worker. You watch the kids ride their bikes.
You see the neighbors coming home from work.
The posture is inherently observational, not interactive in a high-stakes way.
Crucially, the porch is the historical epicenter of a specific oral storytelling tradition.
Narratives shared on a front porch do not adhere to the rigid, mechanical structures of a Hollywood screenplay.
They do not require an inciting incident, a rising action, and a climax.
They meander.
They rely heavily on digression.
One anecdote flows into the next, based purely on emotional or thematic association, rather than strict chronological causality.
The ultimate objective of a porch story isn't to race toward a resolution.
The objective is the communal sharing of a reality.
The source notes that Levi's approach mirrors this entirely.
He writes as though he isn't attempting the grand, ego-driven task of writing a novel,
but rather just trying to transmit something genuine.
The text even says the chapters themselves lack the rigidity of traditional chapters.
They're described merely as moments, encounters, reflections.
It sounds highly episodic.
It does.
But I have a serious mechanical question about that.
Lay it on me.
If the chapters are just organic, meandering encounters, how on earth does the book generate any forward momentum?
A narrative still has to move.
Right. If we are just floating aimlessly through the town of Golden having random reflections, doesn't that risk becoming a disjointed, frustrating mess for the reader?
It's a risk, absolutely.
How do seemingly disconnected moments accumulate enough gravity to make a reader care?
Well, it is the central paradox of this specific literary form.
It presents itself as structureless.
But the structure is simply operating on an emotional axis rather than a kinetic or action-based one.
A helpful way to conceptualize this is the creation of a mosaic.
Okay, a mosaic.
When an artist places the first few tiles on the cement, which correspond to the first few encounters or reflections in the novel, the viewer cannot see the picture.
The tiles appear isolated, merely fragments of color.
But as more tiles are painstakingly added, the relationships between the colors begin to form a wider, coherent image.
The momentum of the narrative does not rely on a sequence of cause and effect dominoes falling.
Like the vault was breached, therefore the alarms triggered, therefore the police arrived.
No, the momentum is generated by the steady, unrelenting accumulation of intimacy.
The accumulation of intimacy. That makes sense.
So every single time Theo has one of these quiet encounters with a resident of Golden, Levi is pressing another tile into the mortar.
We get a fragment of the local baker's history.
A sliver of the schoolteacher's regret.
A moment of a teenager's anxiety.
Initially, they seem separate.
But eventually, the sheer volume of these intimate details creates a massive, interconnected emotional web.
We start to care because we possess a complete panoramic view of their humanity, rather than just seeing them as plot devices.
Achieving that panoramic view requires a very specific linguistic discipline,
which the source material identifies as deceptively simple writing.
The analysis highlights that Levi avoids flashy vocabulary and overcomplicated labyrinthine sentence structures.
Every line is carefully considered, but it is stripped of ornamentation.
This is a vital architectural choice.
When a writer is attempting to build an emotional mosaic out of subtle moments, the prose itself cannot become a distraction.
If the language is overly poetic, dense, or self-consciously clever, it draws the reader's attention away from the characters.
And points it directly at the author's ego.
It's like watching a street magician who is doing way too many flourishes and card cuts.
Yeah, exactly.
You stop paying attention to the actual illusion, and you just start evaluating the dexterity of his hands.
The technique overshadows the magic.
Levi's prose, as described by the source, eliminates those flourishes.
But the critical question is, how does this simplicity conceal depth?
The source text provides a brilliant psychological explanation for this.
It suggests that a reader might consume a paragraph, consciously register it as just a nice or pleasant description, and continue reading.
However, hours or even days later, the underlying significance of that simple paragraph will suddenly crystallize.
The simplicity of the language allows the emotional meaning to bypass the reader's immediate critical defenses and embed itself in the subconscious.
It functions like a narrative time release capsule.
I love that phrase.
I have absolutely experienced that phenomena.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
You read a piece of dialogue that seems entirely mundane. Just two characters talking about the weather or fixing a car.
In the moment, it reads as filler.
But then you're doing something completely unrelated, like driving to work the next morning, and the actual weight of the subtext hits you in the chest.
You realize what the character was really saying about their grief or their loneliness.
Because the author didn't use neon signs to highlight the emotion, you had to arrive at the realization organically.
And because your own brain did the connective work, the emotional impact is devastatingly stronger than if the author had just spoon-fed it to you.
That delayed emotional detonation is exactly how the subtle, accumulating momentum transitions the reader into the thematic core of the novel.
When you asked how momentum is built without plot points, this is the answer.
The structural transition relies on the premise that momentum is forged by the increasing density of emotional weight and recognizable human truths.
As these quiet time-release moments gather in the reader's mind, the overall resonance of the story grows incredibly loud.
Which brings us to the real philosophical heavyweight section of this deep dive.
The thematic core and the elevation of the ordinary.
The source material is emphatic that the true, lasting power of this novel lies in its ability to prove that absolutely everyone has a story.
It focuses a massive amount of empathy on the people we routinely overlook.
Or the people we falsely assume we already have figured out.
This represents a profound philosophical and sociological stance.
Consider how we operate in our daily lives.
From a purely neurological standpoint, we are forced to employ cognitive efficiency.
We encounter hundreds, sometimes thousands of people a day, physically or digitally.
We do not possess the biological bandwidth, often referred to in sociology as the Dunbar number.
Right, the cognitive limit to the number of people with whom one can maintain stable social relationships.
Exactly. We don't have the bandwidth to deeply engage with the sprawling, epic complexity of every single person we pass.
Therefore, we reduce them to their immediate function.
The individual handing us our morning coffee is reduced to the barista.
The person dropping off a package is the delivery driver.
We strip them of their humanity just to get through the day.
It's like how we treat NPCs, non-playable characters, in a video game.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
They exist in our reality solely to hand us an item, provide a service, or block a doorway, and the second we walk past them, they cease to exist in our mental rendering of the world.
Well, Theo of Golden operates as a direct disruption of that cognitive efficiency,
It demands that we pause and look at the NPCs of this fictional town.
forcing a realization of their staggering internal depth.
There is a word for this realization. Sonder.
Sonder.
The profound, humbling understanding that every random passerby has a life as vivid, complex, and filled with joy and suffering as your own.
The text highlights 4 specific themes Levi uses to facilitate this experience of Sonder.
The first is human connection.
Specifically, connection entirely devoid of grand theatrical gestures.
We have been conditioned by cinematic narratives to believe that true connection requires a frantic sprint through an airport terminal to declare love.
Or a dramatic speech in the pouring rain.
The ultimate rom-com climax. If someone isn't holding a boombox outside a window, does it even count as a connection?
Levi's narrative argues that it does. and that the grand gesture is a fiction.
True, sustainable human connection is forged in microscopic interactions.
It is a shared glance of understanding across a crowded room.
It is the quiet act of remembering how a neighbor takes their coffee without having to ask.
It is the ability to sit in companionable, unforced silence.
The source material emphasizes that the emotional devastation of the book doesn't come from tragedy, but from recognition.
You read a scene detailing one of these micro-interactions, and your brain instantly maps it onto your own life.
You recognize a quiet kindness your own relative once showed you, or you see a reflection of your own unspoken loneliness.
When a writer successfully captures a hyper-specific, totally mundane detail of human behavior, it feels a bit like telepathy.
It instantly bridges the gap between the author and the reader.
And it makes you feel significantly less isolated.
Okay, looking at the second theme, our text highlights, it brings up listening.
But it makes a very sharp, deliberate distinction.
It says the book explores truly hearing someone, not just responding.
That feels like the absolute bedrock of Theo's character.
I want to really dig into the mechanics of why that distinction is so critical.
It is arguably the most vital distinction in interpersonal psychology.
If we analyze a standard conversation, the vast majority of the time, the participants are not actively listening to one another.
No, they're engaged in a mutual waiting game.
While person A is speaking, person B is rapidly formulating their response.
Scanning their memory for an anecdote to counter with, or preparing advice.
The conversation is essentially a competitive exchange of ego or information.
I am painfully guilty of this.
I think we all are.
A friend will be telling a story about a frustrating travel experience they had.
And instead of actually feeling their frustration with them, your brain is rifling through its filing cabinets to find your own objectively worse travel story.
To drop the millisecond they pause for breath.
It is a terrible habit, but it feels like the default setting of human communication.
It is the default setting because it centers the self.
Truly hearing, as modeled by the protagonist in Levi's work, requires the conscious, difficult suspension of that ego.
It requires the listener to temporarily make their own mind a blank slate.
You receive the other person's reality without immediately filtering it through your own biases.
Without judging it, and crucially, without attempting to fix it.
When you truly hear someone in that manner, you are providing them with existential validation.
You are confirming that their reality is real and that it matters.
This ties directly into the third theme highlighted by the source: kindness.
In the context of this novel, kindness is not defined by heroic sacrifice.
It is defined by these small acts with lasting tectonic meaning.
Providing someone with your undivided, ego-less attention might actually be the rarest commodity on Earth right now.
In an environment saturated with smartphones, smartwatch notifications, and split-screen media.
Giving another human being 10 unbroken minutes of eye contact and validation feels almost like a radical, revolutionary act of kindness.
It is radical.
And the fourth theme, the source material, brings up layers, even more complexity onto these interactions.
The theme of memory and reflection.
And how the weight of the past fundamentally shapes the present.
When Theo interacts with the people of Golden, he is not operating in a historical vacuum.
In a small, insulated community, you never just interact with the person standing in front of you.
You are simultaneously interacting with the ghost of who they were a decade ago.
The reputation of their parents.
The lingering echoes of mistakes they made in their youth.
The physical geography of the town is mapped with these memories, adding a dense historical weight to even the most casual encounter.
So if we pull all of these thematic threads together,
The rejection of the grand gesture in favor of micro-connections.
the egoless act of truly hearing someone,
The profound kindness of attention.
and the heavy ghosts of memory, what does this actually achieve?
It means that the small scenes in Levi's book are carrying the entire payload of the narrative.
A passing interaction at a hardware store or a shared memory on a porch carries all the dramatic weight.
The book seems to operate on the absolute truth that real life is not comprised of explosive, cinematic turning points.
Real life is a tapestry woven from millions of these tiny, seemingly inconsequential, ordinary threads.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what the source material finds most remarkable about this achievement is Levi's tonal restraint.
It explicitly points out that despite dealing with these profound moral and ethical themes, the author never resorts to preaching.
There is no heavy-handed messaging.
The narrative never stops to deliver a lecture on the importance of community.
The persistent underlying philosophy that people, in all their ordinary complexity, matter immensely is simply demonstrated.
By presenting the undeniable humanity of the townspeople without commentary, the narrative reality serves as its own irrefutable argument.
It is the pinnacle of the show don't tell rule.
If a writer explicitly states in a paragraph, you really ought to be kinder to your neighbors because you don't know what they're going through, the reader instantly rejects it.
It feels like a reprimand.
But if that same writer crafts a meticulously observed, beautifully restrained scene of a notoriously grumpy neighbor privately struggling with an immense hidden burden,
The reader organically arrives at the conclusion that they need to practice more grace.
which brings us to the actual physical experience of consuming this book.
We've analyzed the structural mechanics, the passive lens of the protagonist, the themes.
But what is the practical application? What actually happens to you when you sit down to read this book?
What happens to the nervous system of the reader who sits down with Theo of Golden?
The source material is very clear about the target demographic and the resulting psychological effect.
This book is tailored for readers who are actively seeking character-driven, meaningful narratives that elevate people over plot mechanics.
It appeals to an audience that desires to engage emotionally rather than just be passively stimulated by spectacle,
The text notes that the primary export of the novel is perspective.
emphasizing it as a core outcome.
It serves as an active, almost therapeutic reminder to notice the minutiae of daily life, to appreciate the nuance in others, and to cultivate the habit of deep listening.
If you are looking to numb yourself after a hard day, you put on an action movie or a procedural drama.
You shut the brain down.
But if you want to turn your empathy back on,
Yeah.
this book functions as a specialized tool for that.
Yes. And that duality is what makes the text significant.
It operates on two distinct parallel tracks.
On the surface track, it is a piece of high-quality entertainment, a meticulously crafted exploration of a small town.
But on the deeper track, it functions as a mechanism for mindfulness.
Engaging with this pacing acts as a gentle but firm forced slowdown for the reader's brain.
The source text makes a beautiful observation. It states that this is a book you will naturally pause during.
You don't pause because the prose is confusing or because you lost the thread of a complex plot.
You pause because a sentence resonated so deeply that you literally need to stop and reflect on your own reality.
It creates, as the notes say, space to think.
Space to think. We almost never encounter that in modern media.
The vast majority of the content we consume is explicitly designed to eradicate mental space.
It is designed to fill every available millimeter of our consciousness so that we don't have to be alone with our own thoughts.
The music, the constant talking, the infinite scroll.
It's like an acoustic and visual foam sprayed into the cracks of our day to keep the silence out.
To find a piece of media that doesn't just want to distract you, but actually wants to hand you back the silence so you can process your own life.
That is an exceptionally rare artifact.
It is exceptionally rare, and from a psychological standpoint, it is increasingly vital.
The source text asserts that the concepts Levi explores, genuine listening, unforced kindness, attention to the ordinary, are not merely nice poetic ideas.
They are fundamental human requirements that modern living actively causes us to forget.
The frantic, pressurized pace of contemporary life induces a form of emotional and social amnesia.
We forget the mechanics of deep connection.
We forget that the people serving us have rich internal lives.
We forget how to listen without centering our own ego.
Reading Theo of Golden serves as a cognitive intervention. It is an act of remembering.
That explains why the source material insists this is a book you keep permanently.
It isn't a disposable paperback thriller that you read once, find out who the killer is, and leave in an airport lounge.
You keep it, revisit it, and recommend it because it acts as an anchor.
You place it on your shelf, knowing that 6 months from now, when the noise of the world becomes deafening and you feel completely fractured and disconnected,
You can pull it down, read 10 pages about a quiet town, and fundamentally reground yourself.
it feels almost medicinal.
Medicinal is perhaps the most accurate terminology we could use.
It acts as a targeted balm for attention fatigue.
When an individual spends their entire day reacting to urgent, high-stakes, flashing stimuli, their parasympathetic nervous system becomes severely dysregulated.
Returning to a narrative ecosystem that is slow, deliberate, and saturated with empathy allows that nervous system to downregulate and recover.
By engaging with the text, the reader is essentially adopting Theo's physiological and psychological posture of stillness.
The book does not just tell a story. It trains the reader in the lost art of presence.
It is genuinely incredible how much sheer gravity a narrative can generate when it strips away all the pyrotechnics and manufactured drama.
When it relies entirely on the foundational truth that human beings in all their ordinary, messy glory are endlessly fascinating if you just have the patience to look at them closely.
Synthesizing everything we've explored today, it is clear that Theo of Golden does not demand your attention through manipulation,
It refuses to shout.
but through its unwavering authenticity, its deep structural empathy, and its meticulous observation, it earns that attention completely.
And according to our deep dive into the sources, it leaves an indelible mark on how you view the world around you.
It stands as a profound testament to the idea that the most transformative stories are rarely the ones featuring the highest external stakes.
Often the most impactful narratives are the ones that serve as a mirror to our own lived daily experiences.
Reflecting back the quiet, uncelebrated dignity of everyday survival and interpersonal connection.
This is a crucial text for anyone suffering from the exhaustion of modern media, craving a genuinely human encounter rather than a sequence of fabricated, high-octane events.
So if you are listening to this right now and you feel that exhaustion in your bones,
If you feel like you desperately need to step off the cultural treadmill for just a moment and let your mind breathe.
this is the slow, steep tea you've been looking for.
Which leads me to a final provocative thought based on the architecture of this book.
We have spent considerable time analyzing Theo, a protagonist defined not by his aggressive actions or his will to conquer, but entirely by his capacity to understand others.
He operates as a clarifying lens for the entire town of Golden, allowing their true depth to be seen.
It raises a vital question for you to consider today as you navigate your own routines, your own interactions, and your own small communities.
If someone were tasked with writing the narrative of your life right at this very moment, how would your character be defined?
Would your story be characterized entirely by the loud, frantic things you were rushing to accomplish? The emails dispatched, the arguments won, the endless checklist of goals?
Or would it be defined by how deeply, patiently, and quietly you are paying attention to the ordinary people sharing your space?
In the narrative of your own life, are you demanding to be the spotlight, or are you willing to be the lens?
That is exactly the kind of question that forces you to pause and recalibrate. Thank you for joining us on this incredibly deep dive today.
The next time you find yourself swept up in the relentless high-speed current of the day, try to remember the concept of the front porch.
Remember the value of stepping into that liminal space, slowing down your internal rhythm, and actually observing the humanity around you.
Sometimes the most powerful disruptive thing you can possibly do is just to be quiet, suspend your ego, and truly listen.
Take care of yourselves and find some space to think today.